Spoiler warning, this video contains major details about Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I've left plenty of timestamps in the description, allowing you to avoid spoilers for select games. All footage in this video was recorded long in advance by me. These are real videos of my first time slaying each boss. Number 20. Demon in Pain, Demon from Below, and Demon Prince. This unusual boss, who bridges Dark Souls 3's Ashes of Ariandel DLC to the Ringed City, consists of a first phase where two hulking, dimly lit, fiery demons of yore tear at the player and take turns charging down to catch their breath. When both suffering demons are slain, they fuse into the flying juggernaut Demon Prince, revealing themselves to be the enemy of Elder Prince Lorien. This boss's design evokes tension, despair, desperateness, and isolation. It's sure to afford you very little time to stop and think, and it's a challenging and complex fight that makes up for some of the ridiculously easy bosses in 3's base game. Number 19. King of the Storm and Nameless King. You guys, I'm not a big fan of Dark Souls 3. I was losing hope, becoming so bored with how slow-paced and easy the game was, until this secret optional boss showed up. To me, this is the first and only wow part of the base game. High up on top of a raging draconic storm, the Nameless King flies in with style and hits harder with his giant electric glaive than any other boss in the main story. He finally got me thinking outside the box, and then made me gasp when I found out his true identity after the fight. Number 18. Great Grey Wolf Sif is one of Dark Souls 1's easier bosses. However, I enjoy his wacky design, his cool attacks, and his overall presence, and his music is one of the catchiest songs of the series. Sif is fun, but most of all, I enjoy his role as a character in the game's universe, as well as a part of the fandom. This boss really stands out as one of Dark Souls 1's cooler enemy concepts, and people like to get really emotional about this boss, and that's justifiable. He actually starts limping when he's about to die. Plus, that secret animation he has? The giant wolf with the sword in its mouth is just one of the most memorable parts of Dark Souls overall. Number 17. Sister Frieda, Father Ariandel and Frieda, and Black Flame Frieda. One of the longest boss titles in the series. Now, I'm not a fan of Dark Souls 3's story. I think its plot is very uninteresting. But if there's one part where I came close to loving the story, it's this boss. This is my most defeated boss in the series because I used it to grind for sunlight medals. And after defeating it over 30 times, I got to rewatch its cutscenes a lot. And I appreciate them. The imagery, music, cinematography, and voice acting blend together for a kinda artsy experience that cryptically reveals the motivation and backstory of these characters, with several examples of interesting symbolism. Plus, this guy has one of the best monster designs of the series, and Phase 3 of the fight, a one-on-one against an empowered Sister Frieda, is a genuinely fascinating challenge, much harder than the previous phases. Number 16. Vicar Amelia. Vicar Amelia is a great boss. To me, she's possibly the most iconic monster in Bloodborne, aside from the Cleric Beast. Amelia is what I'd like to show people when introducing them to Soulsborne. She's a brutalistic, speedy powerhouse with a powerful presentation and a visual design worth getting hyped over. Dealing so much damage, and with the ability to heal herself when she's below 50%, she can test your patience sometimes, but Vicar Amelia represents the exact point when boys become men in Bloodborne. Number 15. Emma the Gentle Blade and Ishin Ashina. Now we're getting serious, we're getting to the really good stuff. Sekiro is full of incredibly fun sword fights, and this duo boss is one of the best examples. It's one of Sekiro's few optional bosses, which you're only going to encounter if you've triggered the bad ending. Emma and Isshin are not recycled bosses like Hirata Owl. They're new, fully fleshed out enemies with their own dynamic attack patterns and musical compositions. With Emma's graceful style and Isshin's intimidating flame manipulation techniques, dueling each of these mighty samurai was intensely gratifying for me. Number 14. Burnt Ivory King! We made it! We got to the token Dark Souls 2 boss. Yes, 2 does have the weakest bosses of the entire series, with a couple key exceptions. And the Burnt Ivory King is the only boss in 2 that I like enough for this list to put him in the top 20. Killing the Ivory King is somewhat easy if you come in with a high enough level, but there's no Dark Souls boss that's so flamboyant. The Burnt Ivory King has style. First of all, because this boss arena looks like something out of a Final Fantasy game with the flames, the tree roots, the portal gateways, the screaming, groaning landscape. And second, because before meeting the king himself, you have to kill about a dozen of his charred Lois Knights with the help of a band of teammates, which can include NPCs, players, and 4 of your own Lois Knights who seal the portals from which charred knights spawn. What the Ivory King lacks in challenge, he more than makes up for with his presentation, style, and unique gameplay, and I wish more Dark Souls bosses were like this. P.S. If you spend a half dozen hours grinding for Lois Souls in the Ivory King's boss arena, you can gain enough of them to access a really cool Easter egg just outside the arena. Just another thing that makes this boss special. Number 13. Great Shinobi, Owl. Did you know this boss is one of Hidetaka Miyazaki's favorite Sekiro bosses? I think that makes sense, with the sheer personality that they lended to this man's attacks and animations. Owl uses feints, tosses explosive dust and little anti-healing grenades, uses your own footing against you, and pulls a Frieza by begging for mercy in the middle of the fight, baiting you into his reach. This boss is another of Sekiro's unique, fantastically fun, and ever-repeatable sword fights, and I'm glad they put so much thought into making it stand out. Number 12. Guardian Ape. Did you know this is the second of Hidetaka Miyazaki's favorite Sekiro bosses? And despite being such a hectic one, I'm on Miyazaki's side. I love the Guardian Ape. It's one of the few bosses that isn't strictly a sword fight. It's a giant, ferocious animal that fights exactly like it should, by stomping around, screaming, throwing its own waste, and slamming you with its fists clenched. Its unpredictability and high HP do make it very unforgiving, but when you finally pulled through and whittled down that red bar, you'll be pleased to find that it has a second phase. I honestly did not expect this the first time it happened. But yes, the Guardian Ape rises for a second phase, its severed head in hand, with new attacks, behavior, and everything. It's a hardcore, challenging delight, making another monster that embodies what I love about Soulsborne. Number 11. Dark Eater Midir. I can't believe Dark Souls 3 made it this far on the list. My opinion probably differs from the fandom majority, but one of my gripes with 3 is that they made the bosses way too easy, which is totally against expectations. But Dark Eater Midir is the one boss that does it for me. I mean, he is the reason I got into Dark Souls. I wanted bosses like this. This is what I come to these games for. I was getting disappointed at first at the bridge when I thought he'd just be a weird mini-boss instead of the real deal. But then I found out you can meet him in a secret boss arena after knocking him off the bridge. He's a beautiful but terrifying behemoth who flexes his wingspan and purple aura throughout the fight, resulting in awe-inspiring shots like this. And he's really freaking strong strong, too. I mean, specifically in single player. He's the only boss in Dark Souls 3 that made me feel like I was playing the good old games again. Learning his complex attack patterns and oh-so-subtle telegraphs, working out just the right gear and strategy to match him even though I was at level 140, Meteor is wild. I love him. Just wish the rest of the game were something like this. Number 10. Orphan of Kos. Arguably, depending on who you are, Bloodborne's most challenging boss fight. Only 12% of players ever get this far in the game even once, making it incredibly unlikely for you to find a partner to fight this boss with. You're stuck all alone, pit 1 versus 1 against this incredibly threatening nightmare. The Orphan of Kos has high HP, no obvious weaknesses, ranged attacks, its movement is snappy and unpredictable, and it's hardly possible to find a moment to take a breather whenever you're near it. If you've gotten this far in the game, you've already proven that you have good reflexes, but they're going to be put to the ultimate test for this one. It makes a really great fight, but my favorite part about the Orphan of Kos is its dreamlike presentation. The droning, high-pitched, depressed music, the grim, cold, wet scenery, and the slimy, white H.R. Geiger creature designs all culminating together, with the deceased Great One on the sands of the beach looking like it could be the final boss itself. Never have I seen a game so accurately emulate the feeling of having a bad dream. I have no idea what the Orphan of Kos means in the context of lore, but I'll never forget it for the incredible, unprecedented challenge it provided me, along with the perfectly surreal, Lovecraftian, Dali-esque environment that it placed me in. Number 9. Amygdala. I know that's not how the word is pronounced, but it is the way that one NPC chooses to pronounce it.
Oh, Amygdala.
The Amygdala is, to me, another one of Bloodborne's most iconic bosses, especially because you're required to fight it many times for 100% completion. It frequently appears in high-tier Chalice dungeons. It's a toughie, with its various slam attacks that deal tremendous damage, the laser blasts from its many eyes, and the hard-to-avoid jump attack that can one-shot you. In its second phase, it goes feral, tearing off 2 of its arms and using them as clubs that extend its reach. I didn't respect the Amygdala so much the first time I killed it, but after fighting it subsequently, it really grew on me. It just so perfectly encapsulates what I love about Bloodborne. The Amygdala is one of those bosses that's so hard you can spend days or weeks attempting it, pulling your hair out, thinking you may never manage, thinking it's overpowered, trying to come up with new strategies for it, but eventually, it can be mastered, it can be overcome, and I really cherish that experience. It's exactly why I bought Bloodborne. I wanted to feel truly challenged, and Amygdala did it for me. It's a huge boss, a tough boss, a memorable boss worth fighting a half-dozen times. Although I didn't love it so much at first, I now choose to believe that it's a magnificent boss, and some of From Software's best. Number 8. We're really getting to the good stuff now. Every boss up to this point has been great, or even amazing, but these last 8 bosses are the few that were so good, I could feel it in my gut, in my nervous system. These bosses were so cool, so fun, so hype, that I never got tired or disappointed after they killed me. I just kept coming back for more, until the job was done, and I felt sensory overload. These are bosses I could fight all day. And starting at number 8, we have...
わしはこのアシナをよみがえらせねばならぬ。主を切るぞ。
Genichiro, Way of Tomoe, and Isshin the Sword Saint. The true final boss of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice delivers an intense experience. Another long, incredible, unique sword fight. One of the best, marked in Phase 1 by a rematch with your arch-rival Genichiro, then in Phase 2 with a plot twist duel against the powerful Lord Isshin, the baddest swordsman in the land. In Phase 3, Isshin whips out a giant halberd, assaulting the wolf with crazy, non-stop dual-wield techniques. The wind howls, and the lightning of Tomoe stirs the air in this most intense of melee duels. The difficulty of this fight is one of the highest in the entire game, but it can be mastered, and when it is mastered, it becomes an absolute pleasure to face off with Isshin again and again over your New Games Plus. In Phase 4, the biggest of boys, Isshin-sama, uses the heretical lightning technique to cut you down, but reversing it toward him makes this the easiest and, honestly, gimmickiest of his phases. But when that moment comes that he recognizes defeat, lays down his arms and kneels to the ground, you know that you've overcome one of the wildest gaming challenges that you will ever have to face. Number 7. Knight Artorias. What does it for me that made me love this fight so much? Is it because Artorias was built up so heavily before I actually met him? Is it because finding this place, the Sanctuary Garden, was such a secretive challenge and I had to slay the Sanctuary Guardian just to get here? Is it that his turn to the dark was a really cool plot twist, and his visual designs and animations are beyond perfect? It's all of these things, combined with the fact that he is one of Dark Souls' greatest combat challenges. Unlike the overbearing Four Kings or Sanctuary Guardian, Artorias is perfectly able to be beaten in single player, but he has very high HP, defense, and attack power. His moves are swift and rhythmic. This battle, like many other great bosses, is like a dance, but in order to overcome him in solo play, it's best to shake up your loadout. Find a new weapon and a new set of armor that will work, and then learn his attack patterns. Adapt to them. Train your reflexes. You must overcome the thoughtful challenge of finding the right kit, and then the technical challenge of surpassing him in combat. Once the mighty Artorias is slain, you're rewarded not only with story progress, but with immediate access to the region of the game where high-level players like to hang out and grind. Finally, by besting Artorias, you've earned a spot among the big boys of Dark Souls, and that's just the coolest feeling. Number 6. Speaking of bosses who made me hyperventilate, number 6 is Ludwig the Accursed / Ludwig the Holy Blade. Ludwig is the first boss of Bloodborne's DLC, and what an introduction! If you didn't find it hard enough just to get here and kill some of the mini-bosses on the way, now you're confronted with this absolutely ghoulish work of body horror, like something I could never even have imagined. The many limbs, the distorted jaws, the second mouth, the teeth, the absolute gore of it all as he stands in the pool of blood surrounded by half-living bodies. But Ludwig isn't just bark, he sure does freaking bite. Ludwig is one of the fastest bosses in the game. Need a moment to heal? Too bad. He's already chased you across the entire arena and unleashed 2 attacks at the same time. Ludwig is one of those bosses who feels just about as hard to fight in-game as in real life. So, for best experience, I highly recommend putting on the Impurity Oath Rune and summoning League Master Valter as your helper buddy. I know many people are opposed to using co-op in this game, but Valter, in my opinion, contributes a good deal to this boss's fun factor. Side by side with your very own master, you might have a shot at taking down this most excruciating of monsters. Until you find out, he has a second phase! Ludwig pounces up on his hind legs, becoming this towering, divine, moonlight greatsword-wielding entity. And now is when the music changes to my favorite song in all of the Soulsborne series. You're listening to it right now. So powerful, so catchy, so emotive. Ludwig, one of the hardest, coolest, and most strategic bosses in Bloodborne, is as deserving of his theme song as he is of this spot on the list. Number 5.
久しいなフクロウのせがれよ
お嬢殿
さてやろうかせがれ殿
Now, this boss didn't get me to hyperventilate like the last two. I was more relaxed and prepared when I finally defeated her. But I certainly was feeling the hype of my life while I practiced fighting Lady Butterfly. She doesn't have the greatest music, nor the most dramatic presentation, but as a very early boss in Sekiro's story, Lady Butterfly was what made me realize this was the game I've wanted for months. I walked into the ladies' arena severely underprepared, and I died over and over, literally dozens of times, but it was like I didn't care. I felt honored to have the privilege of fighting her. She doesn't use swords per se, but she does use melee attacks, and she was just a really, really, really solid sword fight. With all this precise footing, this rhythm that I remember Sekiro for, and these present but hard to figure out patterns, and all the attack techniques I had at my disposal. I had a blast losing over and over again to Lady Butterfly. She's the simple epitome of a fun boss, but also probably the bane of newbies. Number 4. Dragon Slayer Ornstein and Executioner Smough. Yeah, did you know this one was coming? I don't know if most fans consider Ornstein and Smough the funnest, but they are one of the most famous bosses from Dark Souls. In my opinion, this is the boss that determines whether you have what it takes to beat this game. Especially if you're playing in single player. Like, sure, you can summon Solaire or one of your buddies to come and make it easier, but if you don't know how to do that, and or if you're playing earnestly, then you're gonna be put through the ringer. Ornstein and Smough are a long way from the nearest bonfires, and because of the fact that they're constantly teaming up on you, moving different directions, always swinging and giving you no time to land a blow on them, you're forced to get very creative in order to win. And that's what I love about Ornstein and Smough. You can't win by just being a really high level or having the best equipment. That's simply not enough. You have to get creative by coming up with your strategy on the fly. You have to have hand-eye coordination, be smart, manipulate their movement, figure out what'll work, take risks. That's why this boss sticks out to me as this game's true test of mettle. And that's why I think it's so brilliantly, intelligently designed. I consider Ornstein and Smough to be Soulsborne's most symbolic boss, but I think my 3 favorite Soulsborne bosses will surprise you. Number 3. One-Shot Wyvern! No, not really. Demon of Hatred. Maybe you didn't see this one coming. In fact, statistically speaking, you probably haven't slain this boss. And that makes sense. After all, it's an optional boss you have to go out of your way to find, and it's also by far Sekiro's hardest boss. The Demon of Hatred is some of the most serious big boy stuff on this list, so its name is very fitting. Do you have what it takes to meet Soulsborne's ultimate challenge? If so, you may approach the Demon of Hatred and try again. This may be arguably worthy of being called a super boss. I love that FromSoft didn't hold back. His attack patterns don't change very much over the phases, but he's another one of those enemies where all his stats seem maxed out. He has stupendously high HP, he's crazy fast, he has long range, and he can 2 or 3 shot you if you misstep. The Demon of Hatred demands precision movement and quick response to its nuanced attack patterns. In order to beat this boss, you need to be very sparing with your healing items. Maybe pop a few candies now and then, and learn its attack patterns like the back of your hand. And finally, when you've had the perfect run, dodging its swings, taking stabs at it like a pathetic mosquito, using your healing gourd very cautiously, finally, when you land the Shinobi Execution on it and find out who the boss really is, you've just made a prestigious achievement. One that you may find was worth it, and certainly one you'll remember for a long time. Number 2. Lawrence the First Vicar, my favorite Bloodborne boss. And also, fun fact, the most rarely beaten boss in Bloodborne, aside from Yharnam. Only 9% of players defeat Lawrence. This is because he's the only optional boss in Bloodborne's DLC. You're only able to encounter him after slaying Ludwig, which very few players can do in the first place. And I'm not sure which is harder, Ludwig or Lawrence. They're both these colossal, inescapable, furious Goliaths. But Lawrence, for being this hidden boss who doesn't even reward the player with much, is a beast to behold. His attacks are heavy and fast, and he closes the distance on you so fast that you can barely catch a break. Due to his unpredictability and radiant fire damage, you have to be very selective about when to attack. Which is hard when he's constantly rushing at you and you don't even have a shield in this game. Careful timing and cautious footing are essential to fighting Lawrence. Thankfully though, this is another boss you can fight with League Master Walter, and he does wonders. Yes, he makes the fight a little easier, but that's certainly not a bad thing for Bloodborne, a game with a very low online player base where you might choose to take all the rare help you can get. Because you're not going to find any player teammates, and the NPC ones are really mediocre anyway. Walter is not strong enough to win this boss for you, far from it. You're still doing all the work. He just takes some load off your shoulders by absorbing attacks for you and supplying background damage when you can't. Walter makes this fight more interesting and memorable, just like Ludwig. But do all you can to keep Walter alive before Phase 2, when Lawrence's legs are cut off and he begins spamming you with lava and flame attacks. Meanwhile, just crying and shrieking in desperation, shaking the entire universe with his wails. As Lawrence begins crawling and clawing at the floor, the absence of legs doesn't slow him down. His damage output just increases, and you need to be more thoughtful about your footing than ever when his waist is constantly surrounded by a pool of magma. Bring your strongest, heaviest, max-reinforced beast-slaying weapon and keep practicing with Walter in order to join the 9% of players who have what it takes. He's an extremely well-designed, solid, fair, exciting 10 out of 10 boss that I have fond memories of. Especially the moment when he almost killed me right before I landed the final blow. Number 1.
お迎えに参上いたしました。今しばらくお待ちくだされ。
なるほどな。貴様を殺しきらぬ限り流因を我が手にはできぬ。
Genichiro Ashina and Genichiro Way of Tomoe. Yes, he's not a final boss, nor is he some dramatic and hidden optional boss. Genichiro is just the second main story boss of Sekiro. And despite that, he's also the second hardest, next to the Demon of Hatred. From Software held no punches when designing Sekiro. They know what their fanbase covets is an extreme challenge that other games can't provide. You won't find a fight like this in Zelda. Genichiro represents peak From Software, a hyper-paced sword duel in the highest room of a castle. Yes, it's a fair fight, but the fact that he's only the second boss is what makes this so real. By this point in the story, your stats are still low, your healing items are still few. By this point, you're still learning the ropes and figuring out the techniques. I know multiple people who got stuck at this boss and stopped playing. Genichiro comes speeding at you way before you're ready to check whether you're prepared to beat this game. Are you? Can you dodge his adaptive attacks? Can you counter his blade? Can you block his arrows? Yes, you've slain Gyobu and the Blazing Bull, but Genichiro is a whole new story. And boy is he fun. Just like Lady Butterfly, I had this experience of not minding how many times I died, but just coming back over and over again for more. I had the absolute time of my life just practicing the Genichiro fight. I felt electricity in my body, reminding me of my earlier fights with Artorias and Ludwig. But unlike those fights, I was feeling this electricity, this hype, throughout every single attempt of the fight. It just never got old. I'm so glad they placed Genichiro so early in the game to place a check on noobs and to make this fight what it is before you've unlocked higher stats, more advanced attacks, and more uses of your healing gourd. When you've finally proven you have what it takes to knock out Genichiro in Phase 2, From Software says it's not over yet, and Genichiro Way of Tomoe initiates Phase 3. He offers up completely new attacks that can two-shot you in the blink of an eye if you're not prepared. By this phase, your healing gourd is running dry, and you'll probably let the nerves get to you, what with the wind, the lightning, the pounding music, and the shirtless warrior. He'll cut you down unless you're ready to master the blade right now. It's a perfect fight. Sekiro's definitive sword duel. A sequence of gameplay I could just play on repeat for hours more, not really caring if I lose, just having the best sword duel in video game history. My only wish for Genichiro is that I had a solid rematch with him later. I mean, I thought he was a good antagonist, but he ended up overshadowed by his grandfather Isshin. Sekiro doesn't have a strong story, but it's evident that it has many of the most fun boss fights in Soulsborne to date. And very soon, we'll see if the highly anticipated Elden Ring can compete.